Authenticity Month, living with integrity and inner alignment. All that we say and what we do should align or be in alignment with our values. If Positivity Month helped to restore the heart and the spirit, and Critical Thinking Month sharpen the mind, Authenticity Month brings them together, anchoring in truth and action. Where critical thinking encourages you to examine your beliefs, questions assumptions, and elevate or evaluate your decisions. Authenticity Month asks, now that I know better, how do I live better in the alignment with who I truly am? What's your take on that, Dr. Winkler?
So my take on, what I'm hearing is integrity. I'm hearing if your behaviors align with your core values, what I've been taught is that is integral. And when we talk about Critical Thinking Month, what was the other month before that?
Positivity Month.
Positivity. I like the positivity and then the critical thinking. In fact, I like the critical thinking in many ways. I'm thinking right now as I speak that maybe critical thinking should come before positivity. But I'm only saying it because lots of us, I think, are toxic, and we have toxic positivity. So we have to be critically, acutely aware that we're just not fooling ourselves. So yeah, but I think that all these months, I'm not sure what you're actually asking me, but I think all these months are necessary, powerful, and definitely when we talk about was it authenticity?
Authenticity, yes.
I think all these are core, wonderful core values, or I think these are values in and of themselves.
Okay, now let's look at areas of focus. When it comes to Positivity Month, when it deals with the heart or the feelings, let's say emotional healing and self-worth. Emotional healing and self-worth. Mind and thoughts, areas of focus. Positive thinking and reframing. Another focus area, engaging in wellness activities. And 4, spirit and purpose, restoring connection to self. Because I realize without connection there is no growth. And remember, the action and behavior areas of focus is engaging in wellness activity. That seems to be something that you are that you embody and that which you live. And then the mind and thoughts. I think Buddha says all that we are is what we possess as the result of thought. Positive thinking and reframing. And then the heart and feelings, emotional healing and self-worth. What's your take on those? Positivity Month. When it comes to focus area or area of focus, heart and feelings, mind, thoughts, action and behavior, spirit and purpose.
Sounds all good to me.
Great. Now, let's look at Critical Thinking Month. Emotional awareness with reasoning. I have concluded, don't necessarily mean that it's so, that the faculty that has been given to us, the primary faculty that has been given to us, is the ability to be able to reason.
Some would say, and I debate either way, honestly. I debate any direction. I heard one of my mentors say the other day, I probably heard him say it before, but I think I may have rediscovered him saying that emotions are older than thought, and perhaps there's some reasoning behind it. Maybe there's somewhere that he can reason that. I'm just not quite sure if that is true. And I'm not quite sure if the other way around is true either. I kind of think they all exist, and probably to some degree have always existed simultaneously. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong though.
Thought. When you think of thought, do you think of what Dea Jehuti? Thought.
Well, when I think of thought, I think of I don't necessarily think of Tahuti or Jehudi or Thoth, but somewhere along the line I'll probably get there. And if I think about Thoth or Tahuti or Jehudi or Thoth, I think of thought though. Yeah, or thinking, or critical thinking and analysis. So yeah, maybe the other way around.
Okay. Do you think that every thought begins with a seed?
What does that mean?
A seed that is planted in your thought or in your thinking, in your mind.
Well, I think that sometimes I do think I think there's some stimuli that brings about the thoughts and actually form the way that we do think. In fact, I think thoughts themselves can be stimuli for other thoughts. Feelings can be, or emotions can be stimuli for thoughts. Hence, stimuli meaning the seed for those thoughts. So I believe thoughts can be seeds for other thoughts. Emotions can be seeds for other thoughts. Experiences and behaviors can be seeds for other thoughts.
Okay, now what about emotional reasoning? I realize I'm saying two things. That someone said that the greatest inventory that we have is our human emotions. But then there is something called emotional reasoning when it comes to automatic distorted thoughts. What's your take on that?
The greatest inventory is our emotional reasoning?
Yes, our human emotion.
Our greatest inventory?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means that, we have a tendency to have a conscious or remorse for what we do.
We tend to have conscious remorse.
Yeah.
Meaning that what does that mean? We have like regret or something? What is that?
A regret could come into play. Yeah, like you did something and you show remorse for what you do. You feel some sorry for it. You're sorry for it, if I use the word sorry.
And that is emotional reasoning.
No, not emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is associated with automatic distorted thinking, which means you're reasoning just with your emotion without any logic involved.
Yeah, you're connecting those two, though, right?
Yes, I am.
And what was the question again?
I forgot the question.
So I think the question is more like, what did I think about that? I think that was like that.
I can't recall.
What was the greatest inventory?
Yeah, I was saying that I made a statement that the greatest. I've heard that someone say that the greatest inventory that we have is our human emotion.
So anytime there's a question like that, you already know I'm like, I don't know how they measure anything being the greatest of anything.
Yeah.
So I mean, it sounds good.
Yeah, I connected it with having remorse for something that a person have done to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I do get it though. I agree with it. I guess I would say simplistically or holistically, meaning that if we don't control our thoughts or our emotions, we will be remorseful and even regretful about the way that we carry and conduct ourselves with others.
Yes.
Some of us will not only emotionally reason, we begin to intellectually reason so that we won't feel those feelings.
Yeah.
So I think emotionally reasoning or overly intellectualizing or intellectually blocking those emotions all are problematic. As you know, I believe it's all about balancing all of them.
Yeah,
you know?
That's the key to balance. And I will elaborate a little bit because my thinking is this here is that since society is under social reconstruction, and the first thing is that our feelings are becoming desensitized, and that is the what I've dealing with this the desensitization of one's feelings and emotions. It almost take on a form of a social psychopath, so to speak, when he or she has become disconnected, and a person may become disconnected from what we call reality. So we're dealing with even escapism or a form of escape. And this is when people somewhat can fall victim of taking on some form or adapting a behavior or a behavior of addiction or substance use, trying to escape. Maybe one could say, or I could conclude, it almost takes on something that could be misappropriate used or applied, altered states of consciousness. And what's your take on altered states of consciousness?
Man, so you're bringing up a lot in me, and I'm trying to manage my own thoughts and emotions. But
How about that?
So you know, I think altered states of consciousness, we all live in them. There's a variety of altered states of consciousness. Like everything else that I would probably say, we need altered states of consciousness, but then we can overdo anything and underdo anything. So I think that when I think about all these things that we're talking about, I think about how much work it takes to manage all these components. And I really think that the way that we've been reared in society, many people are really failing at being able to manage and balance and deal with all these things that you're speaking about, whether that be the intellect or the emotion, or whether that be the behavior. Some people are really good in intellectualizing, or intellectually, let me say that, because I don't want to denigrate intellectual strength, just like I don't want to intellect people who are emotionally strong or people who are behaviorally strong. But one without the other, to me, is lopsided and asynchronous. And lots of people are very strong in one area or the other. To me, is about balancing them all. And where I'm starting to really realize is that, to be honest, just to be straight frank, since you want to have a conversation, is that I believe that I'm pretty strong in all of these areas. Not to say I'm perfect by any means, but I realize it takes a lot of work to be strong or balanced, let me say that, in these areas. So I don't really, at this point in my development, I understand why people struggle, because it takes a lot of work to do that, and lots of us have not been taught, or our makeup has not been we haven't been able to master these areas. And I think we got, so yeah, it's a lot of people who lack the ability to really manage all these different components. That's all I really want to say. I'm saying it's a lot of us. As I put a post out earlier today, that there's a lot of people masquerading as adults, and the thing is, a lot of people can play dress up, but underneath of all of that, we're dealing with a bunch of people who are underdeveloped because of the society that we find ourselves in. And at this point in my development, I'm no longer willing to sit here and act like I'm talking to adults, when I know underneath all of that is not respectfully, not in a non-respectful way, but I refuse to to participate or engage in certain relationships with people in ways that I know they're not prepared or able to really participate in a healthy manner without abusing their proximity.
Okay, that leads me to the next expression in creative thinking. But before I do that, that's why I often says that I promote the value of self-worth, but I communicate through 5.5 channels, which are components. One is understanding, and the second one is tolerance, and the third half of this maturation process, and these 5 channels of communication, which are also components, is temperance / temperament. And then we deal with confidence and respect. The temperance is a bridge builder or connector to the tolerance. And then that connects with the understanding. The temperament connects with the confidence. And then that connects with the respect. Critical thinking, the next one, is that evaluating beliefs and logic. It seems as though, what you stated earlier, it seems as though that do you spend a lot of time evaluating, what you believe or your beliefs in logic and your logic? Do you spend time evaluating that?
That's a question.
That's a question.
For me specifically?
Yeah, yes, it was, because I was coming back in reference to saying there's certain areas that you are strong in, and I'm saying is that maybe you spend time evaluating your beliefs, or when it comes to evaluating your logic.
Yeah, I've been doing that a long time though. I've been doing that since I was a child. Mm-hmm. And I don't think getting back to the conversation, just to kind of make it real for me and maybe others, is that I don't think many of us had the luxury to do that. And I say luxury because sometimes people weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah. Sometimes
people weren't they weren't in a safe enough space to do that. They weren't, or we can say environmentally, right? The environment wasn't conducive to that.
Yes.
Then also, maybe also physiologically or biologically, there's certain reasons why they didn't do that. But nonetheless, I do evaluate, and I have always evaluated, and I've learned to not over-evaluate. I mean, of course, I'm not, again, you can at times, but then you catch yourself, because there's some of us who really evaluate things, but we go too far. And so far that it goes back to some of the things you said earlier around that, and I understand why you installed this month of positive thinking or positivity or what have you.
Yes.
Because some of us are very critical. We evaluate our thoughts to such a degree that we tear ourselves to shreds. And it's okay to evaluate, but to overly evaluate ourselves can be just as detrimental. So to me, again, it becomes that balancing game that, again, I've learned to do, where I won't over-evaluate or become so critical of myself that I'm tearing myself apart. So I think it's important. I do evaluate my thoughts, but I don't get to the point where I'm tearing myself apart. If I do evaluate myself, and I do, it's about how do I improve a thing. Or maybe it's like, maybe I should have did that, but I won't go down a rabbit hole and get stuck in it for too long.
Okay. Because I know that the brother that wrote Compensatory Code, I think Racism, I can't recall it.
Nearly Fuller.
Yeah. He said that when we come together, we should give each other constructive value.
Right.
Yes. So,
because what is that constructive value?
Instead of being, being, of course, the opposite of constructive, it's destructive. It's almost like you're tearing. We could tear each other down rather than build each other up.
Yeah, I was teaching my class last evening, and I think they're doing a real good job, by the way, at Waynesburg University. I was teaching them how constructive, some people might call it constructive criticism, and they were looking at, they kind of still saw constructive criticism as a negative. They say like, well, you gave me the constructive feedback, then you gave me the good feedback. So I tried to, my articulation was that the constructive feedback is good feedback. Constructive feedback is love. Constructive feedback is positive. We just have to learn how to take it. We have to learn how to digest it. We have to learn that none of us are completely where we can be. I don't care how far you are. And I won't even say things like you're not perfect, because in some senses I do think people are perfect. What I mean by that is, we are perfectly humans, or we're perfectly I think that the idea of perfection is the problem. In many senses is unreachable, so it's not even a real thing. So it's not a negative thing that you're not quote unquote perfect, because no one has reached it. So no one has reached it, but the fact that no one has reached it lets you know that you are perfect in that. Because if you have reached it, then I'll say that we might have to have ground for imperfection. If you reached it, there's an imperfection there.
Yeah, I think my thing is that we should be, instead of we look for perfection, we should really be after progress. I think Vincent Barney says something about perfection, the former football coach. He was saying that if we won't attain that, but we will attain, I'm paraphrasing, to some extent, about excellence, not perfection, but excellence. I'm thinking it was self-excellence, I believe it was. I can't recall technically what that says. Somebody else may be able to do that. But now it moves to the next transition of Critical Thinking Month, because once we deal with the emotional awareness, with reasoning, evaluating beliefs and logic, then we move. In doing so, it is like aligning actions with evidence. Yes, because what happens a lot of times when we deal with a lot of emotions, we're not aligning it with evidence, and we like to sometimes overlook and bypass those things which we are confronted with on a daily basis, because I realize that is it more difficult to confront yourself rather than live yourself? My answer was that it could be more difficult to confront yourself rather than live yourself. So in doing so, I think that when the facts has been right before us, Vance Fanon and some other people say, now we're dealing with what we call cognitive dissonance, when shit is right in front of us and we refuse to accept that which is right in front of us. Now, the next critical area of focus of Critical Thinking Month, before we move to finally Authenticity Month, which we are now, is that once you align your actions with evidence, then you're clarifying the direction and goals. You're clarifying your directions and goals. Now, the Authenticity Month, the first area of focus is, and I want you to elaborate on this one, is emotional honesty and congruency. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Emotional honesty and congruency. Okay, so you have one that's emotional honesty. Is that with oneself?
Yes.
And then you have congruency, meaning are you connecting that with emotional honesty?
Yes.
So your emotions are congruent with something?
Yes, that's right. Because say, for example, you can tell that a person is not in agreement or not in alignment with, let's say, what's going on with that person. When he or she, when it's 100 degrees, and they have a winter coat on.
Yeah, I think, to me, authenticity is perfection. Mm-hmm. And then to think about it, going back, like, I think anything else is a lack thereof. For me, I strive to live authentically. And that means in a way that's not to just, it's not in mask. It's not to mask yourself. It's to really be genuine. It's not to say you don't, take people in consideration and stuff like that. I think that's a little different. But I think to show people that you're human, to show people not in a sense that, because sometimes I think I overdid that, to be honest with you. That's being real authentic right now. In some senses, I've shown people so that they can feel comfortable, around me, that I'm human too. But I think that to some degree, that can be problematic. But where was I going? But I think to be authentically yourself, perhaps, means it's not even about you. It's about all of us. It's like, I think that when a person lives authentically human, that allows other people to do the same. Because lots of us are walking around as frauds. And going back to the post I put out earlier, many of us are masquerading as adults, but we're really allowing our inner child to run wild. Meaning that a lot of us are showing up dressed in adult, but feel like imposters. And I think we have to make those aspects of ourselves congruent, to go back to your congruency.
Yeah.
And even when we show up as shamans, or we show up as a husband, or we show up as a wife, or we show up as a brother, and I think that title should be congruent, I think, with what you're saying, perhaps your behaviors, and I think that a lot of us struggle with that because we haven't had the environment that produces one who is able to trust others. Hence, we don't really, in fact, we're struggling with trauma and emotional stuckness and all these type of things. So we're not authentic. We're just in survival mode, and people are used to being in survival mode, are tap dancing to tunes of survival. So I think that part of not being traumatized, not being stuck, is to live authentically. And part of it, just to be honest with you, parts of me, not authenticity in general, but people that say I'm living authentically, or I'm going to be my authentic self, lots of them are not being their authentic self. And that's kind of like that's a pop term and a pop phrase that I hear people saying. One of my dear brothers told me I'm going to be my authentic self. And I said, that's fine if you're going to be your authentic self. You just have to understand that your authentic self will engage with somebody else's authentic self, and there's repercussions to that. So just because you live in your authentic self doesn't mean that other people won't also be their authentic self, and there won't be repercussions. Don't mean or reactions or responses or some engagement, positive or not so positive. So being your authentic self comes with positive or negative consequences.
Yeah, so that's why it's always good to be grounded. So there's a lot of things that you shared that comes to mind. One is unmet needs, unresolved trauma is always concluded that leads to the drama. And the vulnerability of being your authentic self, that renders you to be very vulnerable. And then we're dealing with you, the doctor, on this one, some form of abandonment. You know what I'm saying? So the reason why I say that is that false promises can be made to people. And when people offer a promise, but they don't come through on that promise, and then therefore the individual can feel as though he or she has been abandoned or have been let down. So it's almost like I'm not downplaying any parenting or mother or father, is that they could have the title as a mother or father, but their actions or behavior is something totally different. It's almost like you could be perpetuating, promoting a fraud. And what happened is nothing worse to me than fraudulent behavior. Is when you pretend to be something that you're really not, And so these are it's very challenging when it comes to masquerading or even imitating something just to get you by and just to find your place of belonging in the society. Whereas we know biologically, our DNA says that we all are uniquely different. So why would you, I'm not saying why, so what people can become influenced on the society in which they live in, try to find a place, trying to find a place of belonging, trying to find a value, to be an imitation of something that they themselves are unable to live up to, or that which they thought somebody can live up to a role in title, but not in a role of behavior. It's pretty interesting there.
So what I'm hearing is monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah.
Monkey see, monkey do, and we're in a society that celebrates frauds.
I didn't want to say that, but that's okay. I gotta stay away. But yeah, it's good stuff though. Good stuff though. Okay. Living by your values and inner truth. Remember, we still on the fraud thing, living by fraud. That's good stuff, really. And because when a person living by not your value, because we get society which you live, some people try to live up to somebody else's standards. And you can't live up to nobody else's standards, you know what I'm saying? Even in and I don't get caught up in it, but maybe I'm elaborating a little further. Because even in religious sects, you know what I'm saying? Religious sections, you know what I'm saying? This is the standard that somebody else set in their particular locale. And then that started to what? Spread, because the consensus accepted, and then this is something that spreads. The same thing when people accept, when we're talking about Greek culture, a lot of times people be spreading because they accept Greek culture, then they spread Greek culture. And I don't want to get into the fraternities, sororities, all the other stuff, but they can spread that, because for me, you got to deal with culture influence, culture traditions, family background, individual experiences, and environment. A lot of times this stuff starts to shape us. So we got to be careful that we don't articulate the ideas of that which is oppressing us, and that which is oppressing us, to me, is ignorance. So now you're ignoring something. Now, making choices, another authenticity part of Authenticity Month or area I want to focus on, making choices that reflect your core values. See, for me, my core values are opportunity, expression, and appreciation. And finally, in Authenticity Month, walking in your truth with purpose. And I'm hearing this is what you're saying that you are doing.
I'm trying my best.
Yeah.
But walking in my truth with purpose, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job at it. There was so much you said a few minutes ago. It's you spoke about how if we're not careful, we'll be imitating, and we'll be, I guess, for lack of a better term, not necessarily what you said, but what I can kind of like recall in my own mind and my own way of framing things is that imitating the very system that is oppressing you. And spewing what came up for me is celebrity culture, where there's people who have greater importance essentially than others in our minds, and it's worship culture. And one of the things that came up in my mind, like, I think it's one thing to be your authentic self, and I think to watch out for those type of cultures like you spoke about, as far as the Abrahamic, I guess.
Yes.
You didn't say cults, but I'll say cults.
Mm-hmm.
Or cultures. In Mohammedan or whatever other type of Abrahamic, Muhammad is part of that, but I just want to be clear, some people don't see that as a part of that, or Hinduism or anything, whatever it is, Black Power even, and I espouse those type of ideas. But the reality is, I don't have I agree with that. I agree with the idea that we don't know why we're doing things half the times. We just want to belong.
Yes.
And that becomes an issue. But what I think, though, was what is more essential for those who say they want to walk in their own truth, however, is to know that it is important to walk in your truth. But I think that it's also essential that your truth is connected with other truths. And that if you agree upon something, if you agree, not because everybody's not necessarily being told what to do or imitating Abrahamic faith. Some people are coming together and agreeing on doing things, and then they drop the ball. I think to be your authentic self, we have to be honest what we signed up for, and if you aren't able to carry that out, that is not being in accord with your highest values. And that goes back to something else you said earlier, that is not, which prompted me to say, that is not being integral. Because lots of us don't feel comfortable enough in our own skin, and we'll sign up for all types of things. And in essence, we just wanted to that we know that we we're not going to be able to carry out. So yeah, I think we have to be really true with ourselves. Is another thing you said earlier, starting off. We have to be true with ourselves and what we're capable of doing. And I see things from a collective lens. So I think although you have to be your authentic self, I don't think that should be limited to your individual cocoon.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Because in closing, people always talk about we always talk about higher power. I think the higher power for me is the importance of community, and that is the collective. You can tell the collective psychology of one's mentality by what he or she produces, and for me, it is based on anthropology and how people interpret their reality. That may be their reality, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's yours. You just have adopted it. And people do follow that which is popular because it is safe to do so. Mm-hmm. The intervention, in closing, what it restores, and the key element. The clinical intervention, stability, and mental health when it comes to the mind. The social intervention, relationships and responsibility, that's the connection. The indigenous intervention, identity and heritage, that's the culture. The spiritual intervention, the morale compass and purpose, that is the soul. The soul is the investment. And finally, the sustainable intervention, that is the long-term thriving of the future. One thing I've learned about someone that says, and I use this about healing, I forgot the person's name, Alan something, and I've rephrased it just a little different, but it's very the same. Healing does not mean that the damage never existed. It just means that you don't let it control you. Any final thoughts, conclusions, or words? Dr. Winkler.
I think you said it all.
Until next time, we're at TNAT Wellness Center in conjunction with Common Humanity Mission. We thank you. Take care.